following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up, to stand up and fight back.
Welcome to Speak Up. I'm Kevin Avard, your host, and today I'm joined with Greg Moore from the American for Prosperity Foundation.
Yes.
Greg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. I really appreciate it.
Greg, you got a long list of on your resume. Could you just tell me a little bit about your background? Tell our guests you were a member of the House, or
no, actually, I the business end of the House,
business end of the House
of Representatives. Prior to serving as the state director for Americans for Prosperity and Americans for Prosperity Foundation, I served as the chief of staff of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, as well as the policy director for the House of Representatives. That was my experience more on the legislative side. I also had a chance to work for 4 years as a director at the Department of Health and Human Services in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. I've had done some consulting work, had a communications shop. So frankly, I've had a lot of opportunities to look at a whole lot of different areas in the public policy realm, and I've really enjoyed it, and I really enjoy working here at Americans for Prosperity.
Yeah. As a chief of staff, you're basically the chief of staff. You were under Speaker O'Brien at the time, but you're there for both parties,
right?
Correct. I mean, both parties had to come to you, and if somebody needed something or there was a situation, they would come to you.
Absolutely, 400 members, and all 400 have specific needs and goals. I think that it's important to realize that in New Hampshire House of Representatives, it really is a volunteer legislature.
Right.
People often ask, well, how big are the staffs at the House of Representatives? And they sort of chuckle. Not only do they not get a desk or an office, they get a locker.
They get a locker.
Maybe. Some don't even get a locker. So
I shared mine with Greg Hill.
So yeah, and that's exactly it. And it really is a volunteer activity. It's a labor of love. And for people like you who served in the New Hampshire House, it certainly is a great challenge, but it's also very rewarding for a lot of legislators. They really have an opportunity to get themselves directly involved in the public policy arena and make a difference, and they can tangibly point to things that they have done as well as things that they do in the constituent service realm. And so I highly recommend taking the opportunity to serve as you did in the House. Everyone, as I said, we've got so many representatives, 400 representatives. It's almost like everyone has to take a turn to being a rep at some point in their life.
Oh, it's a service. Yeah,
right.
And recently, there was a function here at the Dairyfield Country Club. It was scheduled at the Manchester Country Club, but there were a lot of protesters out there. And there's two parts of this American for Prosperity, correct?
Right. Well, first of all, I'll tell you a little bit about the organization. I'm actually the state director for two organizations. We have Americans for Prosperity Foundation, which is a 501c3, which focuses exclusively on research and educational roles and focuses on putting together reports and providing information to the public.
Nonpartisan?
It's nonpartisan. And there's also Americans for Prosperity, which is a 501c4, which does a lot more advocacy. So it directly gets involved in the process and tries to promote policy issues, particularly as it relates to economic freedom, entrepreneurship, growing the economy, and giving people more of an opportunity, and allowing people to make the decisions that are best for themselves, as opposed to having the government make decisions for you.
Right. Now, recently, there was a survey. I'm a candidate for Senate myself, but I had to fill out a survey. That goes to all the candidates, right? It's not just to any particular candidate.
Absolutely. You know, we actually sent out, it's actually a pledge. Our honorary chairman here in New Hampshire is Tom Thompson, the son of former Governor Mel Thompson.
Right.
And Tom's dad, Mel, when he became, actually before he became governor, took a pledge and created what's known as the pledge in New Hampshire, which is a pledge against the sales or an income tax. And so when Tom agreed to become the honorary chairman, not with me, but with my predecessor, Corey Lewandowski, who was the state director at the time, and he said, listen, I think we should have a pledge as well. And it goes beyond just what his father's pledge was, which was to oppose the sales and income tax, but it also took an opportunity to get involved in a number of very important public policy areas that will help grow our economy. And so our pledge focuses exclusively on 5 areas. And first of all, opposing tax increases and focusing on reducing taxes and fees, cutting the size and scope of government, passing a right-to-work law in New Hampshire, and blocking Obamacare, and particularly the unaffordable Medicaid expansion. So basically, the plan to give Medicaid, which is a substandard medical care, to middle-class Americans, or expanding it to start to cover more people getting into the middle class. And the last one is simply something that's part of your oath of office, which is upholding the Constitution. Mm-hmm. So that's the pledge that we put together. And we asked candidates to either sign it or not to sign it, but we're going to share that with our 42,000 members statewide.
Have you had any resistance to signing that?
Well, I'll tell you, we sent it out last week, as you probably are aware, and we sent it out to over 900 people. Mm-hmm. And it's a little early. I mean, the mailing went out. It's only been literally about 5 or 6 days since people got it, and we've already received almost 200 copies back.
And people we're signing a pledge not to.
People signing a pledge. I would expect that as the time goes on, more and more of these will come back. I expect we tend to get 10 or 15 back every day, and we'll see how many ultimately do, and we'll post all those who actually agree to those. Mm-hmm. Very simple 5 principles to help get our economy moving and expand economic freedom in New Hampshire, and we'll let people know who signed, and we'll also let people know the people who refused to sign.
Well, I did sign, but and unashamedly, I totally endorse it and signed it. I mailed it the next day, and I'm saying it on television.
And we're thrilled, and certainly hope everybody else who's a candidate who's watching this show today actually takes the same opportunities you did.
There is a dilemma, though, and I will keep to my pledge. But recently, the House and the Senate passed the Medicaid expansion. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, that's a disaster waiting to happen. If the feds do not fund that at 100% and it drops down to 90%, there's an option till we can get out of this thing. But it's going to take some courage. You're going to need senators and you're going to need state reps to actually say, look, we have to put a halt to this. Otherwise, somehow we have to pay for this thing.
Right. Paul Ryan, who's the chairman of the House Budget Committee in the United States Congress, I'm sure everyone remembers him. He was a vice presidential nominee with Mitt Romney. But Paul Ryan said that it's the worst kept secret in Washington is that there's no way that over the long term the federal government can continue to pay for Medicaid at that incredibly high level. Currently in New Hampshire we pay 50-50 on basic Medicaid, and the idea that it's going to continue to come in at that high level is a fiction. Yeah. And if that number is brought down to where Medicaid is today, New Hampshire is looking at the possibility of $180 million a year hole in their budget. That would be almost $360 million a biennium, because we do budgets in a 2-year cycle.
Right.
$360 million, you're looking at squarely at a sales tax. And if it gets even bigger than that, you're looking at potentially an income tax.
It was Josiah Bartlett that put out a study saying, look, they shouldn't have done it. They put out the warning flags. They said, this isn't going to happen. This wasn't a good idea. Come on, let's come to the table and reason.
But here's a really important part of it. And this is the part that should be distressing to everyone. I worked at the Department of Health and Human Services for 4 years. I'm very familiar with the Medicaid program in New Hampshire. I wouldn't want any of my friends or my family to ever be on Medicaid. It is substandard care. It really is. It really is more of in the software world they call it vaporware. So you feel like you're getting something, but there's really not a whole lot there. There are several studies in Oregon. Oregon expanded Medicaid, but because this was before Obamacare, they expanded Medicaid. but because in Oregon they couldn't they couldn't afford to cover everybody in a population, they actually had a lottery, and it's a great tool for people doing research and study, because you have two groups, one group who won the lottery and one group who lost the lottery. Basically, you can assume their health backgrounds are fairly similar, and you can measure them to see what the impacts were. And what they found in Oregon was that on the health indicators they looked at, there was no evidence of improved health or health quality by having Medicaid over being uninsured. Moreover, there was a University of Virginia study that looked at 900,000 surgical outcomes. That's a broad longitudinal study. They found that among those people getting surgery on Medicaid, they're actually 13% more likely to die than people who are uninsured, and 95% more likely to die than people who had private health insurance. So giving people Medicaid and then feeling good about yourself because you gave them insurance, but if the insurance is no improvement over being uninsured,
right,
what really have you given them other than a false promise? That's particularly true in New Hampshire, where 1 in 5 doctors won't take new Medicaid patients.
Just going to say, it also limits your options as well.
And particularly if there's a large influx of Medicaid patients who are coming in and they get paid way below market level, as far as the reimbursements to the hospitals and the doctors, they get reimbursed very poorly. The hospitals, if there's a larger influx, it won't be 1 in 5. It'll be half the doctors who don't want to take a Medicaid patient, and then you suddenly have a situation in which Medicaid patients won't be able to find a doctor. And so really, you haven't helped anybody in the long run. What's better is if New Hampshire became a leader in trying to bring free market solutions to healthcare, and really got involved in the process of trying to take opportunities to bring competition, get rid of the Certificate of Need Board, get rid of a lot of the onerous regulations that drive up the cost of insurance, get rid of a lot of the markets clogging insurance programs we have that again also increase the cost. Allow people to buy policies across state
borders,
lines.
right.
Give people all the opportunities in the
They've
world.
been saying this for a long time, for the last 22
And
years ago they were talking
it's
about this.
unfortunate because the insurance lobbyists have a strong hold on the folks in Concord. And particularly when you have a small number of insurers like we have in New Hampshire, where you really only have, as people say, 2.5 insurance companies in the state, the lobbyists have an immense amount of power because they pretty much have the state over the barrel. And so they keep in a lot of the regulations that drive costs up because, as you can imagine, you make money on the margins.
Right.
So the more expensive the policy as a whole is, the more money the insurance companies make. And I don't begrudge the insurance companies trying to make
They're in
money.
it to make money. But
I think that any business should have a right to make money. But it's a problem when the government creates an environment that allows them to have maybe not a monopoly, but a limited number of competitors and high prices for everybody.
right, and that's really what a lot of people are calling cronyism.
And there's a history of that. Going back to 1994, we actually had 26 insurers in the state of New Hampshire. 26 insurers, and that was fantastic. There was a lot of opportunity. At the time, we had the second lowest insurance costs in the nation. Then State Senator Gene Shaheen passed a law that actually drove 21 insurers out of the state. And what happened is, and then after that, a few other small insurers left, which left us where we are now. And then so basically we have a couple of 800-pound gorillas who get to drive up the cost of care, get to create all sorts of regulations and mandates that make it harder for new insurers to enter the marketplace. And you have some of the highest health insurance costs in the country. And it all goes back to some bad policy decisions made back in 1994. And unfortunately, Senator Shaheen has doubled down on, she didn't learn her lesson. So she passed that law in 94 that drove the insurers out of the country. Then she voted for Obamacare, which gave a monopoly of the Obamacare exchange to one insurer, Anthem. And Anthem, and I don't blame Anthem for it, Anthem came in and said that if we had to sell the policies with all the mandates covering Obamacare, our policy costs would go up 30 to 40%, and no one would buy our policies.
Right.
So what they said is, look, it doesn't do us any good to sell a policy that no one will buy. So what they said is, well, what can we do? Well, one of the things we could do is limit our provider network and get better deals by giving volume to a smaller number of hospitals. And that's how Southern New Hampshire Medical Center here in Nashua got kicked out of the Obamacare exchange, and how 9 other hospitals across the state got kicked out. So Senator Shaheen, by driving insurers out of the state and then by passing Obamacare, has had a 20-year history of limiting health care choices for New Hampshire residents.
I used to sell health insurance for Mass Mutual, and I sold a little for Mutual of Omaha, and of course a little bit for Blue Cross and Blue Shield. That's when they had the PPOs and the Good Health Network. And I remember way back when, where they were all talking about, well, these HMOs and all this, it's going to turn into socialized medicine. And everybody said, oh, you're wacko. You're crazy. This is stupid. You're extreme. We're here. We're here.
It's funny how when you look at the number of actual medical providers, and when I say providers, it's not just hospitals, it's just doctors and doctors' offices who are saying, I'd rather take cash.
Yeah.
Let's just pay me in cash, and what we'll do is we'll work out a payment arrangement. It still is. You can still provide your services for cash. The difference is that when you add in all the billing, all the regulations, and all the red tape that gets thrown on top of a bill, I'll give you a great example. So there's a gentleman in East Wakefield, which is over on the Maine border. It's in Carroll County. He went down, he had some GI issues. He went into the hospital. He was hospitalized for several days with some GI issues. And while he was there, he developed a cold sore and asked them for some cold sore medication so they didn't have to suffer from the cold sore while he had other issues in the hospital. So he goes home, gets his bill. His bill is over $21,000. And so he saw the $21,000, and of course, with the Obamacare policy, he has a 25% deductible.
Yeah.
So he says, wait a second, I want to see an itemized version of the bill. He looked through and found that the small tube of cold sore cream, he was charged $3,766 for a small tube of cold sore cream. And that's exactly what happens. These hospitals and the providers are giving all the incentive in the world to inflate their bills, which of course is going to have a huge impact on a lot of these Obamacare policies that have a lot larger deductibles than people are used to paying. And then suddenly they're getting hit with, for example, in his case, on that bill, almost a $5,000 copay for his portion of the deductible. It's astounding, and people are going to get hammered by this.
It's nuts, and we could talk about this forever. One of the things that we were talking about off air is there is an underlying current that's going on, and people are worried about their buying power. And a lot of people don't understand about right to work, and why is that good for New Hampshire? Why is it good to push right to work for New Hampshire?
Well, first of all, I think that for a lot of people are just getting caught up. The cost of living is going up, and their wages aren't going up along with it. So their purchasing power is dropping. They're paying more and getting less. Healthcare is a great example of where people are paying more and getting less. But what we need to see are taking some positive steps to start increasing wages. If people are going to be able to afford more, to increase their purchasing power, to basically live the American dream where everyone's future generation has a better future than the one prior, and that prosperity continues to increase, we need to take positive steps both at the state level and at the federal level. Our focus right now is on some things at the state level. And one important factor that could separate New Hampshire is a right-to-work law. And you remember this, back in 2011 when you were in the House and there was an effort to pass right-to-work, and it did pass the House and the Senate. It was vetoed by Governor Lynch, and the veto was sustained by a small number of votes in the New Hampshire House. Now, when that happened, New Hampshire missed an opportunity. New Hampshire could have been the first state in 20 years to pass to actually implement a right-to-work law. It didn't. The state that did jump into that was Indiana. And Indiana saw a tremendous growth after they passed a right-to-work law. Like New Hampshire, they were a state that was surrounded by other non-right-to-work states, and so they had an opportunity to pass a law that differentiated them from their neighbors. They saw their unemployment, which is predicted to drop down to 6%, drop all the way down to almost 5.3%.
Now, this isn't union killing, by the way. You know, what I saw in the balconies, along with the fists and the fingers, and the outrage, the people, they were raged, they're pumping their fists. You know, they're all saying, hey, you're going to kill the unions. But it's not killing the unions. It's making an equal opportunity for people to negotiate their own
Absolutely. Well, first of all, just getting back to the study, I want to some of the important figures that people should consider. One of the things that we found, looking at it, particularly looking at the experience Indiana had, is that if we look at some of the models of states that have passed right-to-work laws and looked at some of the historical part, particularly looking at Indiana because they created a great opportunity because there hadn't been a state in 20 years that passed right-to-work. Michigan also passed it, but it's sort of a staggered-in approach, so it's not really a good comparison because it'll take several years for it to be fully implemented. But if New Hampshire were to pass a right-to-work law, what we found is that over the course of 2 years, it would create 4,000 to 6,000 new jobs here in New Hampshire, above what we would normally expect. It would actually drive unemployment below 4% here in New Hampshire.
It would slow that traffic jam heading to Massachusetts.
Absolutely, bring more work up here and into New Hampshire, and so that businesses in Massachusetts would have a reason to come to New Hampshire.
Right. Businesses
from Maine would have a reason to come to New Hampshire. Businesses from all across New England and even New York would have a reason to come to New Hampshire. In addition, but one of the arguments you hear as well, it'll actually reduce wages. And what we found is that's just not the case. Looking at a comparison between right-to-work and non-right-to-work states, what we found is that if New Hampshire had passed a right-to-work law back in 1977, so fully one generation ago, wages in New Hampshire would be $3,000 per capita higher now than they are. So we'd have, that's a lot of money. $3,000 a person is a lot of money. And so looking at those macro issues, that's I think a hugely positive reason to consider passing a right-to-work law. But getting down to the micro level, one of the things that is an important finding of our study is that the only states in America in which union membership is growing are actually right-to-work states. And there's a reason why that is. It's because in right-to-work states, unions have to compete. They actually have to get better. They have to show the value to the people that they're trying to encourage to join.
Isn't that part of the American dream, though? You know, iron sharpens iron, and competition helps everybody. It's when the government gets involved and stifles the competition and promotes one over the other. It just stifles everything.
Well, I think that we found that there's been several public opinion polls that have found that even among union members, right-to-work is popular. Here in New Hampshire, right-to-work was over 70% favorable, and it was even favorable among union members. And what we found is it's the real animosity are actually among those people who are in union leadership, not necessarily among the union membership as a whole. So I think most people realize that fundamentally it's wrong to tell people that if you don't want to join a union, you have to pay them anyway. And even if you're not forced to join a union, but suddenly you have to pay a fee to the union. And one of the things the unions say is that, well, they're getting a benefit and that they should have to pay for that benefit of collective bargaining. Well, that's only a case if that employee considers it a benefit. And what I mean by that is, if someone is negotiating your salary for you, that means that you don't have the opportunity to have an incentive to overperform. Because if you're going to make the same amount as the guy in a cubicle next to you, regardless of how hard you work, then you're not going to work really hard because you're going to get paid the same amount.
It's your fair share, comrade.
Well, fundamentally, what we think is that if you look at some of the states that have passed right to work, one of the important findings is that you see productivity gains because employees are more motivated to actually do a better job because their salary depends on how good a job they do, not how well a job that the collective can do negotiating with the employer. And so it's true there are some employers who'd rather negotiate with one person as opposed to have to negotiate individually. But there are thousands of businesses across New Hampshire that actually manage to get by negotiating individually with their people, where the owner will sit down and they'll figure out how much they want to pay someone, and they'll look at their performance and their expected benefits, and say, you know what, you actually did great this year. I'm going to give you a bonus. If you're in a collectively bargained contract, you can't necessarily give one employee a bonus. They can't say, oh, here's a bonus for you. That's not really an opportunity in many of these collective bargaining agreements because everybody has to be treated the same. Well, you know what? As you pointed out, if everybody's treated the same, that's not really the American way.
Right, and it isn't. And I think competition is healthy. It
And
helps-
incentives. Incentives matter. I mean, that's basically fundamentally what economics boils down to, isn't it? Incentives matter. But moreover, I think that first and foremost, some people say, well, how can you ensure that wages won't go down? Well, here's the deal: if you bring 4,000 to 6,000 more people into the workforce, those people are making nothing now. So whatever they're making is an improvement in their wages.
Right.
But moreover, the businesses that would come here, that would find a motivation to come here because we would have a competitive advantage. Now, it's not one item. You can't just pass right to work and expect that immediately everything's going to change. There are a lot of other factors at play. For instance, here in New Hampshire, we have to do a better job of making our business taxes more competitive. We have the 48th in terms of having the highest business taxes.
I think
the
Andrew
third worst.
Hemingway was talking about flat tax or reducing that.
There are a number of different proposals out of there. However, one thing we absolutely need to do is to make sure that our New Hampshire business taxes are lower than Massachusetts.
Right.
Particularly for a border community like Nashua.
And will stay low.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we can, a legislature changes every 2 years. I mean, you can get in a new legislature.
One thing you're never going to have, Kevin, is because of the way our Constitution is structured, you can't do like Massachusetts does and say, well, we'll pay you if you relocate to Massachusetts. We really can't do that per se because of our tax structure. So Massachusetts doesn't say for the first 5 years you won't have to pay any taxes. Our Constitution says
New York's doing that too.
Right. Our Constitution says all taxes need to be uniformly applied and broadly based, which means you can't tax one person one thing and another person another thing and say, well, if you bring your business here, we'll give you no business taxes. We don't have that luxury. What we can sell is a long-term competitive environment and a people in the legislature who are utterly committed to making sure we keep that a competitive advantage over our neighbors.
How can people find out more about American for Prosperity?
It's very easy. First of all, our website. It's a mouthful, but it's www.americansforprosperity.org. If you go, that's our main page, and it focuses mostly on federal issues. But at the top, you can go to the New Hampshire state chapter, and then you'll see a lot of stuff that's focused more on New Hampshire-specific issues and a lot of the things that are going on in New Hampshire, and people can come to events like the luncheon last Thursday, like an event. We'll be several events we're going to be doing in the upcoming few weeks. So fundamentally, I think that we want to get more people involved. As I said, we have 42,000 members across the state. We're always looking to grow and expand and get the message of economic freedom out there. And I think that we can do that, and I think we'll have a real opportunity to get that message out there and to bring a greater focus on these very types of issues we're talking about today.
Perfect. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I really appreciate coming on.
And we hope to have you again in the future.
Absolutely.
Great.
Will do.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you for watching Speak Up. If you want to get in touch with Americans for Prosperity, just look up the website and check it out. And we appreciate you watching Speak Up, and we hope that this is information that you can use. So until next week, thanks for watching. If you would like to be a guest on Speak Up, please contact me at speakupnh@gmail.com. We'll help you be heard.
Every day, citizens around the country are faced with new dilemmas. Dilemmas that affect them profoundly. Whether it's injustice, discrimination, falling through the cracks, scandals and cronyism, balances of power, ethics, religious freedoms, state versus citizens, and unfunded mandates, and the list goes on and on and on. Welcome to Speak Up. It's directed at those who have fallen through the cracks, and it gives them a voice. It's your turn to speak up. To stand up and fight back.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.